when it comes to the growth of digital brands, of course, Southeast Asia is outpacing every other country in the world. Also, D2C business models cannot be approached from just the end use aspect of it. Of course, there's also the whole value chain of designing, manufacturing, marketing, distribution.
And as a part of long term strategy, they want to get to the market faster. So I think the number one point is it comes to distribution. So what D2C distribution gives brands is an immediate access. The second point would be better access to customer data. Now we all know that the more customer data we have, the greater quality of customer data we have, it's going to empower businesses to improve their sales activities. It's going to allow them to better understand what's the customer life cycle looking like, what's the purchasing behavior and the changing needs. So brands are seeing D2C as a new way to enhance the cross-selling process.
And then furthermore, it makes it necessary for these D2C brands to innovate. And that is something that leads to brand leadership.
With significantly more control over the entire pricing, promotion, the life cycle of the customer, and it allows them to influence margins and set prices in a way that aligns with the view of the products. So overall, you can say that this sums up the massive benefits of D2C models that manufacturers and retailers are also seeing.
Hello everyone, welcome back to TF Taps into the Southeast Asian creator economy in collaboration with Budge. This is Shubham Tiwari from Thousand Faces Club. I have with me Shreya from Budge and a very special guest today, Rusha Saha, a creator who's going to share an insights with us in today's episode. Rusha, welcome to the Thousand Faces Club.
Thank you so much, Shubham.
A word about Budge takes you closer to your financial wellness while you focus on your passion of content creation. In the last episode, we discussed the payments and checkout innovations in Southeast Asia, in addition to the larger question of can the D2C model survive in this region? If you haven't watched it, you can always find it on our channel. We'll also put a link to that episode and to the entire series TF Taps into. Today, we are going to take a deeper dive into D2C landscape in Southeast Asia. So let's get right into it. So let's start with Rusha. What is the most favorite type of content Southeast Asian consumers like to access on Instagram, and why does this work for brands?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. And Instagram is a very interesting platform as a reference to establish some insights here. So, when we break down the kind of consumption on this platform, it falls into a few buckets which we all are quite familiar with. So, let's start with reviews. So, more than 30% of Southeast Asians prefer to watch review content, including me, because whenever there's a product testing which is being done by an influencer, it's extremely interesting to watch as well as it gives value to us. Secondly, we have our tutorials. Now, Instagram is a brilliant place to look for tutorials which have been converted into a short form. For example, how to put on your daily light makeup. It could be fashion videos. It could be like a gaming video. It could be anything. It could be cooking. And tutorials always have that special place. I also have unboxing. Now, unboxing has that brilliant example as well as a mix of interest, surprise, and the wow factor. So, opening random products by influencers. We've got the social feed. Now, social feed is more of a maintenance platform. That's where we see that consumers come over there to interact and kind of know what's going on. We also have entertainment. Now, these days we see more and more entertainment kind of content, whether it's watching funny videos or memes. So people come on the platform to entertain themselves. Now, what brands find interesting is most of these content types are product preferred, right? So it's about staying connected. It's looking for entertainment, but it's also product preferred, personality driven. So brands see that when they use this kind of content or they look for this kind of content, what works for them is the post, which has a lot of product information. It's a brilliant way in which an influencer can create a bridge between the brand and the user. So visiting the brands, following the brands over a period of time, visiting the stores, and even making a purchase, users have been seen to make this purchase decisions by visiting the different handles, looking at the brands, and actually purchasing the products. So, kind of starting from inception to purchasing, the entire journey can be used by brands.
Super. Shreya, in what ways COVID-19 has changed Southeast Asia's consumer shopping habits? Also, if you can, talk about what about consumer shopping brands as well, and how they're adapting to
Yes.
this change.
Yes. So, firstly, answering the first part of the question, COVID 19, I mean, the most straightforward response to that would be that, of course, it has brought everybody online. Most people who want to be either, partaking in a certain business or receiving any goods and services from businesses have had to come online. So, what we've noticed in Southeast Asia specifically is that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, 45% of consumers have reduced their offline purchases, and 30% have grown, have 30% of consumers have been making more online purchases. So this has almost created a new sort of normal and like a new balance when it concerns even brands, like how many offline versus how many online consumers do they have. When we look into the movement from offline to online, this will only continue to grow in the future, of course, as the consumers are also realizing the benefits of how convenient it is for them, because online purchases by nature are customer centric. They're not
Right.
they're not as campaign centric, they're not as business centric as they are customer centric. So of course it is going to serve the best, it's going to give the best benefits to the consumers at the end of the day. So when we look at how brands are adapting to this change, this sort of shift that has occurred within especially Southeast Asia, it has outpaced the growth of consumer brands going digital in countries such as Brazil, India, and China. And the fact that it has outpaced digital brands, the growth of digital brands, even in a place like China, is a big sort of data point to keep a note of.
Yeah.
So because many regional brands in Southeast Asia are choosing to grow how their online merchandise is being sold, as well as how the logistics and everything on the back end is being managed also online. They're moving everything online. This shift to digital is offering many like growing avenues for brands, and they're making the most. They're making the best use of that, and
Right.
it's also pushing brands to, as I said, focus on the customer experience and the engagement that they want to cultivate with that end consumer of their products. So when it comes to Southeast Asian consumer brands, this has like really built an innate sense of trying to understand the consumer insights and the data that they are grabbing from those consumers. The customer data that is almost a gold mine for a lot of these D2C brands, is the ownership of that is coming within the purview of the brands themselves. And what they do with this data is what we hope to see, improve in the future, improve the engagement that they have with their end consumers in the future. And that is what insights led engagement sort of talks about, where we
Right.
talk about how consumers provide certain insights through the data that they share with the brands that they are purchasing from. And those that data becomes a source of a lot of the newer insights that are developing in the space to make digital centric brands more customer friendly. So that is the state of how post pandemic things have changed.
Right, of course. I was coming to insights led engagement, and I'm glad you addressed it. So, coming back to Rusha now, do you have a case study of a brand using D2C as a route to customer engagement?
Absolutely, Shubham. So, digital communities and influencers, they naturally thrive on having a very direct connection between the consumer and the businesses. And what D2C gives them is a chance to amplify those voices and reinforce the idea and the nature of this influence. So, Glossier is a US based D2C skincare makeup company, and they always knew how to use influencers and communities to drive direct sales. So, what this company does brilliantly is they do not just market their products through partnerships with social media influencers being brought upon board, but what they do even better is engaging directly with customers. So, and they kind of break it down into different parts as well. So for example, whether it's featuring customers on the Instagram feed, and you can understand that this is a great example in which the customers can share their voice directly, So in July 2021, that's when Glossier raised about $80 million dollars in funding, and that put the company's value at more than $1.8 billion. Dollars. So through this example, what we can see is Glossier understands one fundamental principle, and that's also something what many other D2C brands are learning, is that the best kind of D2C experiences, they get created when brands can capture and combine the data that they get from various different channels, and they also create a very dynamic and holistic view of the customers, capturing the voices, capturing the understanding, and having a two-way kind of conversation. So in that way, the needs and the preferences of customers are built very well, and this is a very good example of a brand using D2C as a route to customer engagement.
Wonderful. At this stage of this interview, let's take a stock of the larger picture here. Shreya, is Southeast Asia ready for D2C?
So, as I mentioned, like when it comes to the growth of digital brands, of course, Southeast Asia is outpacing every other country in the world in terms of that. But when it concerns the aspect of is Southeast Asia ready for D2C, there's definitely some areas which do need addressing before it becomes like a perfect ground for the growth of D2C. So when of course COVID-19 has accelerated the movement towards digital brands, but also D2C business models cannot be approached from just the end sort of end use aspect of it. Of course, there's also the whole value chain of designing, manufacturing, marketing, distribution, things like that. And within that, of course, there is more like the internet penetration. When it concerns Southeast Asia, only 63% of the overall population has been able to onboard onto like internet based solutions, and internet accessibility is to limited to that set of population, and that has led to, of course, certain successes when it concerns D2C, but there is still room to grow. So there is a lot of distance to cover with respect to Southeast Asia when it concerns that. And electronic payments, as we had discussed even in the last conversation we've had, the electronic payment infrastructure in Southeast Asia is, although it is developing, it is growing almost in is it's synchronous with how India's digital payment system is growing. Um, but it still is a little bit far behind from the West,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So those are aspects when it concerns Southeast Asia that, if addressed, it would be the perfect ground for D2C to establish itself in Southeast
Right.
Asia.
So if I ask you about, a successful model for D2C brands in Southeast Asia, what would your answer be?
So successful models, there are like a few sort of tried and tested um, rules to follow when it concerns what a successful model for a D2C brand can be. And these rules are always concerning, of course, branding, marketing. It also concerns the quality of the product, how high quality it is, and the convenience that it is offering the consumer. And in general, we had discussed this rule even before, that as long as the customer acquisition cost is low and the retention is high, that is something that is like a fundamental basis of like being successful within D2C, in the D2C landscape, right? So based on this, there have been a lot of sort of models that have emerged. One of the main models that has emerged and established itself in Southeast Asia is the pre-order model. So this is
Okay.
something that we notice in how even like mobile handsets or like electronics or music, like music CDs, albums, they are pre-ordered by people who want to have access to that particular good, and then they wait. The delivery aspect is not immediate. It is a pre-order because they are placing an order at a lower cost and waiting for that good to be delivered to them when it becomes available. So in Southeast Asia, this has been unique as well as successful, because people are willing to wait for something that they're really looking forward to owning, and they're willing to wait because it becomes slightly cheaper for them to buy it at a earlier stage, at a pre-order stage, and then when it becomes available, they get access to it. So this is something that has like been a uh, sort of successful model, a new model that has
Right.
emerged in Southeast Asia. When it concerns how digital commerce has also risen alongside, it is transforming how customers shop in the region. And this is like accelerating the trend of how customers onboard onto D2C D2C landscape also. So when it concerns the D2C offers, what D2C brands offer, it's much more of an intimate and resilient relationship with their customers that they offer. And this leads to even more unique insights that are then generated. And therefore, there is a more effective brand experience that then sets them apart from their competitors. So it's this sort of step by step process of creating a more intimate relationship with your end users, therefore leading to more unique insights from those users, therefore leading to a better brand experience, which has made it very successful in Southeast Asia. So when it concerns also marketplaces like Shopee and Lazada, they have been D2C has been able to create even a better sort of front towards to their end users compared to more of the digital commerce company, more of the general digital commerce companies like Shopee and Lazada in Southeast Asia. So we can sort of see how successful it has already been, because Lazada and Shopee are huge like mammoths in Southeast Asia when it concerns e-commerce, and D2C has sort of catalyzed a lot of innovation in the space and has been successful in terms of even up leveling over these
Right.
e-commerce giants. So these are the general insights with respect to that.
Wonderful. Rusha, how do manufacturers and retailers recognize and leverage the massive benefit of D2C models?
Sure. So businesses want to sell direct, and that's been established. Now, with time, what manufacturers and retailers are also recognizing is the benefit that D2C models could provide to their business. And as a part of long term strategy, they want to get to the market faster. So I think the number one point is it comes to distribution. So, what D2C distribution gives brands is an immediate access, the immediate access and the immediate opportunities to distribute new innovative products, whether it's your promotion, it's your trial, it's your subscription model. So there are a various number of shopping platforms emerging in Southeast Asian countries where we see that companies rapidly open up and they rapidly have entry into multiple markets. So the second point would be better access to customer data. Now, we all know that the more customer data we have, the greater quality of customer data we have, it's going to empower businesses to improve their sales activities. It's going to allow them to better understand what's the customer life cycle looking like, what's the purchasing behavior, and the changing needs. So, brands are seeing D2C as a new way to enhance the cross selling process. They can upsell, they can have increased marketing activities, etc. The third very important part, which is kind of linked to the customer data, is customer experience. So we see that manufacturers, they use D2C to have a greater influence over the entire customer experience. So now what's happening is manufacturers, with the help of D2C, can build their own sales and marketing strategies. Earlier they did not have this opportunity. They also
Right.
have an end-to-end brand experience, and that gives customer delight. At the end of the day, they have a quick and direct customer feedback which can help them to either change their strategy or tailor their offerings or customize some of the value proposition as well as the customer's need. And of course, we cannot have this discussion without talking about margins. So a D2C strategy is seen to let manufacturers bypass some of those traditional routes and the distribution partners. So savings can go from around 15% from wholesalers to up to 40% from retailers. So while the marketing cost, customer acquisition cost, and we've discussed about those things, operational costs will likely be high, this entire shift and leveraging D2C provides brands with significantly more control over the entire pricing, promotion, the life cycle of the customer, and it allows them to influence margins and set prices in a way that aligns with the view of the products. So overall, you can say that this sums up the massive benefits of D2C models that manufacturers and retailers are also seeing today.
Wonderful. Let's double down on this. And Shreya, can you tell us about the three pillars of D2C advantage?
Yeah, so I think for like adding further to what Rusha already mentioned, she already mentioned how D2C enables brands to differentiate from their competitors. It also another pillar is the customer data, that it empowers the brands to own that customer data. Of course, the ownership of customer data is uh, controversial topic. So, like, that is something that needs to probably have more regulations set in place as to the ownership of that data. But of course, it empowers them with the knowledge of the customer data at least. And then, furthermore, it makes it necessary for them to, these D2C brands, to innovate. And that is something that leads to brand leadership. So these are the three pillars. When we discuss the first pillar of brand differentiation, we are able to understand how customizing the shopping experience of your brand is the way to really stay true to your and it is in some ways enabling brands to stay true to their brand values online. So they're able to customize the experience to the extent where it doesn't have to fit a mold that any brand would have to follow if they were to, they were to onboard onto any e-commerce website. They can stay true to their brand values. They can establish themselves as diverse from the rest of the brands, and they have full freedom to do that. They have full freedom to differentiate themselves from the rest of the brands, and this has made the aspect of even the knowledge that they're able to gather from the customer data. This customer data becomes more intimate, more unique. As we mentioned, this knowledge of your customer is going to be the most fundamental piece of data, which is going to make you capable of even coming up with innovative strategies for brand differentiation, right? So these two things go hand in hand, and this data, they are, by going D2C, they're preventing giving this data away to marketplaces that they would have otherwise been onboarded on. And this is what has empowered a lot of D2C brands to then, as we mentioned, have brand leadership in the landscape. So making the data and the technology that they are sort of functioning upon a priority for the organization, for the brands themselves, it has made it possible for them to adopt a lot of innovative strategies, even when it concerns like management systems. Like if they are like brands, D2C brands, getting to agile management system is something which is on a micro level probably wasn't possible a couple of years ago. But because of the technology and data innovations that they have like full control over now, owning their own platforms and running their own back end as well as front end processes, it has made even management systems and strategies sort of unique to each particular brand, and they're able to establish themselves in those spaces too, and differentiate themselves in those places too. So these are the three pillars that, as Rusha said, have become ways that D2C brands have um, like created a stronghold in the space in Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Shreya. Rusha, how do brands see micro influencers and what is their relevance in building brands?
This is a very interesting question because we will see the changing landscape, because it's easy to assume that brands only want to work with macro influencers, but that's not always the smartest business decision, and brands do recognize that. We see micro influencers who produce at times more relatable content than their macro counterparts. Uh, Now, the biggest difference kind of comes in is when we look at macro counterparts, we see professional photographers, we see stylists, we see makeup artists, we see all kind of consultants kind of coming together, putting that post together. There are so many heads which go into it, whereas macro influencers advertise a lifestyle that's often unattainable. We don't relate to it in many ways and kind of live vicariously through it. On the other hand, micro influencers, they represent accessibility to their followers. Their followers can straight away come, ask them questions, sit together in a live session, and exchange notes maybe. Now, another piece of this is Southeast Asians are also known to highly trust recommendations from another cohort, which is the nano influencers. Now, who are they? What do they do? So, nano influencers are just your ordinary social media users who share content about their daily lives. Now, kind of following what Shreya mentioned about the innovations and the data and associated information that we have around it, I think this is where brands can get very crafty because they understand the value that nano influencers are also bringing on to the users. So, what do they share about mostly? Family, friends, daily activity, cats, memes, etc. But they are recognized by a very, very big audience. So, usually they are your local social media celebs. Could be your friend, college popular girls, your neighbor fashionista, and many more. And the number is increasingly getting higher. So their follower sizes could be somewhere ranging between 1,000 to 5,000 followers. Some also say that nano influencers have like around 5K to 10K followers. Now, even though their audience might be much smaller, but what brands are seeing these days is they bring a very high rate of engagement, which also means that they can have more specialized customer experience, and these nano influencers can take those brands in a more trustworthy fashion and kind of make that end sales happen.
Right. And what could be the possible challenges and opportunities for D2C brands while using influencer marketing?
Yeah. So this is definitely a complex landscape because, like I mentioned earlier, it's constantly changing. So we heard a lot about how brands can benefit by partnering with influencers, but it's not always without risk because we see that large, well-known companies, they often use influencer marketing to establish, maintain a sense of trust, have a certain messaging. And messaging is very, very important for well known big companies because it adds an element of personability which comes in from the influencer, but at the end of the day, the messaging has to be constant. So big brands also find it harder to appear authentic in an influencer recommendation because obviously we as users, even I as an user, would clearly know that it was a paid advertisement. An influencer, on the other hand, who is promoting a smaller, lesser known brand, saying that this is an authentic brand in which I believe in, it could come across as more genuine. So this was the difficulty of those large, well-known companies. Now, your smaller brands also have their own challenges, and this is the other side of the coin. So, as an influencer, marketing often overwhelms the online market. It's harder to stand out, and even harder for smaller brands because the market has gotten more saturated. It's harder for brands to differentiate themselves. So D2C brands have used this as a way to build the brands and the voices. But as smaller companies become bigger companies and the bigger companies are there to stay, they come into the space, start in using influencers to send that message across. So this is also a challenge for the D2C brand who is now forced to think or figure out what's the next thing. So, whether it's big businesses or small businesses, they all can face difficulty managing such networks. So, today, if you say that you are a brand who is carefully choosing a creator who upholds your brand values, you still have to be very sure if the person is going to act professionally, is going to carry out their messaging so that it doesn't harm your brand's reputation. Brands always have to be smart about how they conduct the business on the internet or otherwise. Having said that, we can look through the entire cohort of challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
And my personal take is partnering with the right influencers will always tip your balance more towards the opportunities which are existing in the market, and it can actually help your brand grow exponentially with the right strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rusha. Thank you so much, Rhea. This was fifth episode in TF Taps into the Southeast Asian creator economy. You can check out the previous four episodes on our YouTube channel. Check us out on Instagram as well. We'll see you in the next episode of this series. Thank you.
Thank you.